Gorgias says in his chronicle, "Among all the nations there are some that possess a written law, while others simply observe certain fixed customs, for, among those devoid of law, their ancestral usage is accepted in its stead. To this class belongs the Seres, who live at the end of the world, and apply as law the customs of their ancestors, which forbid them to commit adultery or incest, to steal, to bear false witness, to kill, or do any wrong whatsoever. The law of the Bactrians, called Brahmans or Islanders, which is derived from the forefatherly prescription, prohibits them for reasons of piety from eating meat, drinking wine, committing adultery, or doing any sort of wrong, solely in consequence of religious scruple. But among the Indians who dwell beside them are found murderers, criminals, and doers of violence beyond all nature. In the most remote portion of their country, they practice cannibalism and kill travelers, and, what is worse still, they devour them like dogs. The Chaldeans and the Babylonians have a different code, which allows them to marry their mothers, to commit carnal sin with their nieces, and to commit murder. They regard every shameless deed as a virtue when they commit it, even when they are far from their own country. The Galileans maintain other customs. Among them, the women plow, build houses, and perform men's work, but they indulge in vice to the extent of their desire, for they are by no means restrained by their husbands, nor do the latter at all concern themselves about the matter. There are among them bold women who are capable of capturing wild beasts by virtue of their strength. The women have control over their husbands and rule them. In Britain, many men sleep with one woman, and likewise, many women have intercourse with one man. The people carry on without jealousy or restraint the vicious customs of their ancestors. The Amazons have no husbands, but like brute beasts they are filled with desire once each year in the springtime, and come together with the neighboring men. This season seems to them, as it were, a time of celebration and great festival. When they give birth to children and a male is born, they kill it. But if the child is of the female sex, then they nurse it and bring it up carefully. Just so, even in our own day, the Pelovsians maintain the customs of their ancestors in the shedding of blood and in glorifying themselves for such deeds, as well as in eating every dead or unclean thing, even hamsters and marmots. They marry their mothers-in-law and their sisters-in-law, and observe other usages of their ancestors. But in all countries, we Christians, who believe in the Holy Trinity, in one baptism and in one faith, have but one law, as many of us have been baptized into Christ Lord and have put on Christ. After this time, and subsequent to the death of the three brothers in Kiev, the Polyanians were oppressed by the Derevlians and other neighbors of theirs. Then the Khazars came upon them as they lived in the hills and forests, and demanded tribute from them. After consulting among themselves, the Polyanians paid as tribute one sword per hearth, which the Khazars bore to their prince and their elders, and said to them, "Behold, we have found new tribute." When asked whence it was derived, they replied, "From the forest on the hills by the river Dnieper." The elders inquired what tribute had been paid, whereupon the swords were exhibited. The Khazar elders then protested, "Evil is this tribute, prince. We have won it with a one-edged sword, called a saber, but the weapons of these men is sharp on both edges, and is called a sword. These men shall impose tribute upon us, and upon other lands." All this has come to pass, for they spoke thus not of their own will, but by God's commandment. The outcome was the same in the time of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, when Moses was led before him, and the elders of Pharaoh foretold that he should subjugate Egypt. For the Egyptians perished at the hand of Moses, though the Jews were previously their slaves, just as the Egyptians ruled supreme, but were themselves subsequently ruled over. So it has also come to pass that the Ruses rule over the Khazars even to this day. In the year 6360, the 15th of the indication, at the ascension of the Emperor Michael, the land of Rus was first named. We have determined this date from the fact that in the reign of this emperor, Ruses attacked Tsargrad, as is written in the Greek Chronicle. Hence we shall begin at this point and record the dates. Thus from Adam to the flood 2,242 years elapsed. From the flood to Abraham 1,082 years. From Abraham to the Mosaic Exodus 430 years. From the Mosaic Exodus to David 601 years. From David and the beginning of the reign of Solomon to the captivity of Jerusalem 448 years. From the captivity to Alexander 318 years. From Alexander to the birth of Christ 333 years. From the birth of Christ to Constantine 318 years, and from Constantine to Michael 542 years. 29 years passed between the first year of Michael's reign and the ascension of Oleg, Prince of Rus. From the ascension of Oleg, when he took up his residence in Kiev, to the first year of Igor's principate, 31 years elapsed. 33 years passed between Igor's ascension and that of Sviatoslav. From the ascension of Sviatoslav to that of Yaropolk, 28 years passed. Yaropolk ruled 8 years, Vladimir 37 years, and Yaroslav 40 years. Thus from the death of Sviatoslav to the death of Yaroslav, 85 years elapsed, while 60 years separated the death of Yaroslav from that of Sviatopolk. But we shall now return to the subject, recounting what occurred during this period, and we shall record the dates in order. The years 6,361 to 6,366. Michael the Emperor went forth with an army by land and sea against the Bulgarians. The latter, on catching sight of his armament, offered no resistance, and asked leave to be baptized and to submit themselves to the Greeks. The Emperor baptized their prince with all his warriors, and made peace with the Bulgarians. The year 6,367. The Varangians from beyond the sea imposed tribute upon the Chudes, the Slavs, the Marians, the Ves, and the Kravitians. But the Khazars imposed it upon the Polyanians, the Sverians, and the Vyaticians, and collected a white squirrel skin from each hearth. The years 6,368 to 6,370. The tributaries of the Varangians drove them back beyond the sea, and, refusing them further tribute, set out to govern themselves. There was no law among them, but tribe rose against tribe. Discord thus ensued among them, and they began to war one against another. They said to themselves, "Let us seek a prince who may rule over us and judge us according to the law." They accordingly went overseas to the Varangian Ruses. These particular Varangians were known as Ruses, just as some are called Swedes, and others Normans, English, and Gotlanders, for they were thus named. The Chudes, the Slavs, the Kravitians, and the Ves then said to the people of Rus, "Our land is great and rich, but there is no order in it. Come to rule and reign over us." They thus selected 3 brothers with their kinsfolk, who took with them all the Ruses and migrated. The oldest, Rurik, located himself in Novgorod, the second, Senias, at Belozero, and the third, Truvor, in Izborsk. On account of these Varangians, the district of Novgorod became known as the Land of Rus. The present inhabitants of Novgorod are descended from the Varangian race, but aforetime they were Slavs. After 2 years, Senias and his brother Truvor died, and Rurik assumed the sole authority. He assigned cities to his followers, Polotsk to one, Rostov to another, and to another, Belozero. In these cities there are thus Varangian colonists, but the first settlers were, in Novgorod, Slavs, in Polotsk, Kravitians, at Belozero, Ves, in Rostov, Marians, and in Murom, Moromians. Rurik had dominion over all these districts. With Rurik there were 2 men who did not belong to his kin, but were boyars. They obtained permission to go to Zargrad with their families. They thus sailed down the Dnieper, and in the course of their journey they saw a small city on a hill. Upon their inquiry as to whose town it was, they were informed that 3 brothers, Ki, Shek, and Koriv, had once built the city, but that since their deaths, their descendants were living there as tributaries of the Khazars. Askold and Dir remained in the city, and after gathering together many Varangians, they established their dominion over the country of the Polyanians at the same time that Rurik was ruling at Novgorod.